Hello, I'm Mike France,
And I'm Nicholas Bowman-Scargill.
and welcome to this special edition Open Dial.
Ladies and gents, welcome to this 7th instalment of the Open Dial event, brought to you by the Alliance of British Watching Clockmakers. And on this fine Wednesday evening, I am joined by two tremendous gentlemen who I think you'll know very, very well. Mr. Mike France, the co-founder of Christopher Ward, and my dear friend, Mr. Nicholas Scargill Bowman, the 4th managing director of Fears Watches. And my name's Justin Hast, and I'm still trying to work out how on earth I've got the nod for this one tonight. But I am here, and I'm delighted to be here with you. The evening is sponsored by dear friends at A Collected Man, so thank you very much for that, gents. All that's left to do is welcome Nicholas and Mike to the stage. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening.
Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you, fellas? Are you well?
Doing well, yes. I'm in Bristol today in our head office here, and it's all guns blazing building our workshop. So we've literally had to hurry the builders out 5 minutes before going live. So it's all go here. But yeah, keeping well. Thank you.
I'm not quite so well. I've got a bit of a cold, as you might detect. So I do apologise in advance. It may please some people that I run out of voice anyway, so there may be positives in it for many.
Mike, we've agreed, just so we can make it public now, that if you are struggling, you're just going to disappear from the chat. So it's just going to be Nicholas and I talking. Nicholas, is that work in the background, that interior setup, is that just because the builders are in, or is that something that you've designed yourself?
No. So this is it. I mean, our building was, we're in an old paintworks. So this was built in 1850. And so it's an old industrial building. And what's lovely is you've got the exposed brick, which looks very, very stylish, very trendy, but is very practical. And then we've got random things, like someone donated an old Fears station clock. So we've got that on the wall. And then just for Christmas, this is actually an old street sign taken from the post-war premises of Fears in 1946 for Richmond Terrace. Before Christmas, someone came and donated it to us. So we've got all these sort of random bits and bobs, trying to work out where to put them all and fit them in. Well, we've only been here nearly a year, but still settling in, of course.
Fantastic. Well, just to give everyone out there an idea of how the evening is going to unfold, we're going to have 3 different videos that you gents have pre-shot. I didn't get the call up for those, thankfully, but we're going to run those. Before we dive in, please do feel free to throw questions out there. By all accounts, in the years gone by, we've had too many questions to answer, but we're going to do our very best to get through as many as we can. So please do send your questions for the gents. Before we run the first VT, I have to ask, what have you guys got on your wrist?
I think a countdown is required here, Nicholas.
I know. I think this is 3, 2, 1. Yeah, we are both wearing the Fears Christopher Ward Alliance 01, which, in case you haven't heard about it and you've got a spare hour, I can give you a little rundown about what this watch is about. But we're both wearing a very special watch for this evening.
Indeed, we are.
Dare I ask what reference numbers you've got there, or do we discuss that off camera?
The serial numbers.
Forgive me.
So serial numbers, these two are the pre-production samples. So they don't carry a serial number, they carry a PP number, pre-production 1, pre-production 2. However, we will openly and happily say that Mike and I have been very selfish and said we're having a watch each. We're both buying a watch from Fears to mark this, because it's been a wonderful project, and something we both believe in, and we both want one in our own collection. So apologies that 2 have been allocated to Mike and myself, but hopefully people will forgive us for that.
And just remember, we're paying for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant.
Full price.
Brilliant. I've got a very odd AP Disco Volante on the wrist. I didn't have a Christopher Ward. I don't have a Christopher Ward yet, and I don't have a Fears yet, which is disgraceful. But this is my favorite reference coming out. So let's get into the first video, guys. Please roll video 1.
I think one of the things it demonstrates, which is potentially quite powerful, is that us coming together with this beautiful new Fears watch with a Christopher Ward movement in it, a genuine collaboration, in a way demonstrates that this isn't just a sector, it's actually a community. And it may be that this is the first physical representation of that. There's been a lot of words, we have a website, there's all we have open dials, we talk to each other more than we ever did before, but this is perhaps the first physical representation of this community. And a community is quite a powerful thing if it's as close as it can be in the future. And I think this is a pretty good start.
Yeah, absolutely. For all the larger companies, you've then also got all these much smaller companies starting out in their journey. Some of them, are one-man bands working from home. But what they're doing is they're contributing to the British watch industry. It's always this thing when you talk about Britain, we've got a very strong identity as a nation.
Yeah.
But there's so many things that people will always point to, red double-decker buses, the telephone boxes, black cabs, all kinds of very obvious objects. But actually, and I think this is something we're beginning to see more of, is people are beginning to understand what is kind of the true British ethos. And yes, those are things, but they're representations of what being British is. And actually, when you look at our companies, the way we run them, but also the way we design our watches, there are certain design sensibilities that we adhere to, and it results in very different watches. But it's what I think I've always been saying for years, that British watches have an overarching feel to them that you don't get with Swiss watches, you don't get with German watches. And I think what it is yes, you've got that sort of purposeful function, but actually it's got a certain gracefulness to it. There's little elements that aren't designed deliberately to be whimsical, but I think it's something that you see in British design. And actually Terence Conran once said that. He said that the British design sensibility is graceful yet purposeful function. And it's true. And what we've managed to do is, I think, show it. People would go, oh, it's a watch from the Alliance British. A lot of people would actually expect it to have, the Union Jack emblazoned across the dial, or to be in certain colours that are very British and,
and maybe to be packed in ermine. Because,
yeah, exactly.
Because I do think one of the things that this also represents, in terms of the way Britain can be, is that innovation comes in many different ways, doesn't it?
Yes.
And actually, what we've done, I'd like to think, and what the Alliance is about, is innovating how a sector or a community, as we've just described it, can actually come together to do things differently.
Yeah.
So, in a way, it's not like the rest of the world's watch industry, because this is unlikely to happen. It's unlikely, I think, I might be wrong here, but it's probably unlikely that Rolex are about to announce a collaborative watch with, I don't know, Omega. What do you think?
Right.
What are the chances of that? That's not going to happen. Therefore, one of the ways in which we are doing things differently in this country, and definitely have the capacity to do so, because I do think we are innovative as a country, is actually create the space and the environment where two brands can come together who are in some ways competing with each other in the same marketplace, but actually, as you've said several times, by coming together we all benefit.
Absolutely.
That is very unusual, that is innovative, and I do think innovation and a step into and a foot in the future rather than a foot in the past, which has often been the way the British watch industry has been represented, is really what the Alliance and this watch is about. This is about the future of watchmaking in the UK and not just about the past, even though we recognise the value of a wonderful traditional past.
You know, that's the thing. We have in Britain such incredible heritage and history in watchmaking. That's wonderful. That's what's kind of, you know, built a lot of the industry in the past. But, you know, there's a lot of things going, well, what's going on tomorrow?
Yeah.
You know, because that's part of the story that, you know, yourself, myself, and the other trade members are doing. We're writing those next chapters. And as much as we can be, you know, sort of harking back to what's happened in the past, that's obvious. I would rather more of the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you know, rather than making, you know, a museum gift shop piece, I would rather make something which actually, you know, can stand on the international stage and go, this is actually not just because it's British, but because it's a good watch that has happened to come from Britain. And, you know, that's what we're beginning to see, and I hope people will be encouraged to work towards.
Well, in its hope, in a small way, in a way, essentially this we hope is a signpost to the future of British watchmaking. In a small way, we wouldn't overstate it, but it's a good stepping off point.
Definitely.
For me, one of the key things that makes the design of this watch so strong is that when you think about collaborations between two watch brands, if one wants to, if you're looking to combine both brands in the aesthetic of the watch, I think you're in dangerous territory. And it was very clear from the outset that the way we were talking, that we wanted this to be, Fears is proudly on the dial. And what the role we wanted to play was helping with the design, if we could, but also provide the engine for the watch, the movement. And I think part of the reason that this has, and it may be a good template for others to follow, that actually there has to be a lead design and a lead brand in this. And so it worked really well that that Fears became the lead in terms of the look of the watch, and we provided the engine. And I think because it's a jumping hour, it's allowed that space, that negative space, to be used in a really sort of intelligent and an aesthetically pleasing way. And less is nearly always more in terms of design, and that's not untypical of your designs anyway. I think about the back plate. Famously, you have nothing apart from a beautiful finish on your back plates. We deep stamp most of ours, or have something if they're not exhibition case backs. And the beauty of this is that it's again the Fears approach to life, and it's a beautifully finished back plate. But then the thing that I like most about this watch in some ways is actually on the back, because it's this pleasant surprise of the 4 engravings that we've got on each of the lugs, which are a bit special, I think.
But they're almost like I can't remember which person it was described them, but almost like an alliance hallmark.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's got the 4 bits of key information: the 2 brands, the alliance, and the additional.
And I remember that was definitely your idea. I think that was it. No, I'm pretty sure that was. I thought that was an inspirational sort of addition to the watch. It just is often. The secret of great design is that it surprises somewhere, and this is full of little touches and surprises, like the inner ring, as you say.
Yeah, so I think it was challenging for the reason that we wanted to take the Fears aesthetic, but then try and make it as clean as possible for the jumping hour. Often with things like that, you're tempted to add too much to the design, so we wanted to make sure that we focused on textures rather than kind of more elements.
I remember when it started, it was all kind of you do a little bit your standards. I mean, you do your research with jumping hours, and we had a lot of variant that was kind of looking like something existing, and that was the challenge. Is you don't have lots to play with, and you still want to do something unique. I don't think at that time we really care if it was Fears or not. We just wanted to do something that looked unique and nice, and the Fear touch came, I think, after
Yeah.
with Nicholas.
I think, and also designing a simple watch is far, far harder than designing a complicated watch. So that was, I'd say, one of the bigger challenges.
Yes.
Paring everything back, but keeping all the proportions correct. So you felt like there wasn't too much empty space, but it worked for the design.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was also, I think, nice for Nicholas to see how we do the product on our side, because I don't think it has the same process. Probably a bit more structured, if that's fair to say. Not no disregard to him, but just because of the volume and the quantities that we do, is more of an artisan type of watchmaker, where he's a bit more volume like.
Yeah. And something else that we were quite excited about for this design was the case. So we knew that the case was going to be a new case for Fears. So they've just released the 40mm just before this comes out, and we knew we'd be using that case, so we were quite excited to use that. We also wanted to find a way, as well as on the dial, but on the back, to keep everything very minimal.
It was also good to work with the designer from Fears to have the right font and tweak the sizes, especially on the jumping hour, where when you have the numbers from 1 to 9 is not the same than 10, 11, 12, where you need to resize and or desize, just so these look nice.
So it's changing the size whilst trying to keep the visual weight the same. But I think it's something else that adds to the Fears aesthetic is the colour. So it's very similar to a colour they had done on a bespoke project, I believe, before, that we all quite liked. And so we thought that really matched their aesthetic. And then Nicholas has managed to find a strap that matches almost perfectly with the colour of the dial.
I must say, he has done an amazing job. Like, as much as I was saying that we are a bit more structured, we tend to struggle way more to get the right match between the straps and the dial sometimes than what he done. Probably something to learn from him. Or maybe struggle and he didn't tell us.
Maybe.
That's possible.
Just straight face.
Right, gents. So before we kick off our second film of the evening, we're effectively going to dedicate this question and answer period to Mr. Tim Westermeyer, because he has sent in so many questions that just have to be covered, that it would be wrong not to. So Nicholas, let's start with you. He's actually asking about the design. So he's asking, why did you not color match the hour disc on the jump hour? And also on the dial, there are 3 different finishes. Could you outline what they are?
Certainly. So I'll answer the questions the wrong way round, if I may. But also thank you, Tim, for sending in so many questions, and very detailed questions as well. It's always lovely when people pick up on things and really go into the details. So with the 3 finishes, on the outer section of the dial, we have a sunburst. We then have the concentric guilloche in the center, but there is actually then a frosted area between that and the applied silver ring on the dial. And that's where the numerals are printed. So a very subtle detail, but it's what helps makes those numerals more legible without having a sunburst or a more complicated finish beneath the numbers. So yeah, they're the 3 finishes. And then on top of that, you've got the applied ring. In regards to the hour disc, so obviously, when you look at the dial, it's all red with a bit of silver, and then this very definite white circle with the hour number at the top. And at no point did we think about color matching that. It's one of those things where, people will debate about having a color match date disc. Do you want to hide the date? Do you want to make it go invisible? Personally, I'm always a fan of date discs being very legible and very, very clear and easy to read, but especially on this watch. The hour it's so vital. It's so important for telling the time. We needed it to be a high contrast against the main color of the dial, so that at a glance, you really can see it legible. And black on a white disc is the highest legibility.
And Nicholas, actually, you've just got me thinking. I have to ask, because I almost came to blows discussing this with someone the other day. How do you name the color? Is it aubergine? Is it burgundy? Is it what is it to you? What is the color?
So I would say it's very much a burgundy red. We were debating about whether, is it a maroon? Is it, and actually, no, it is burgundy, because in some lights, you will pick up almost little kind of flecks of brown in there as well. And I think that's the thing. When you hold up a glass of burgundy and you look, it's majority red, but it does have those other colors coming into it. Of course, vineyard to vineyard. But, that's the thing with this dial. It really does change in the light so much. And that's a very sort of Fears trademark of dials changing in the light.
And Mike, just to close on this period, we also have a question from Tim here regarding maybe getting an idea of why you think so many from outside of the UK are interested in joining the Alliance.
Indeed. And firstly, hi, Tim. Tim and I know each other pretty well, and it's great to have you on here asking some really interesting questions, just like that one. Difficult to say, really, but I have there's a phrase that says there's nothing as universal as time, and there's certainly no geographic borders to watch collecting. So we know that people are interested in watches across the world. But if I'm absolutely honest, I think having Roger Smith as the chairman is also a huge positive for the Alliance, and I'm sure many people join because of the credibility and the halo that he gives the Alliance, really. And we're very fortunate to have him heading us up.
Brilliant. All right, guys. So I'm getting abuse from down the line on the tech team. We need to move on to the second video. Let's get it rolling.
So let's have a look at the watch itself.
Why not?
Let's see what we've created here. Now, there's lots of things about the watch that people will immediately notice and go, oh, that's very distinct. But I've got to share with you my favourite part of this design.
Oh, yeah.
My favourite part is actually the ring around the outside of the minutes. And the reason I love this is, to me, sort of true luxury, true sort of almost decadence, is when you have the ability to use space and you don't. You pull back. I call it wasted space, the luxury of wasted space. And I think it's that really comes alive here, because we could so easily have decorated it. We could have so easily put something there, some motive. But actually, by just keeping it sort of clean and empty, it just brings something pure about the design. And I think that was the thing when your designers first were showing me the concepts. That was something present in all of them. And I think actually thinking, what was it that kind of made me go, oh, that's not how I imagined it would be.
Yeah.
And I think it's that use of space.
Yeah.
So with the dead space, the temptation is just go for a very bright, overt sunburst. But actually, by using a matte varnish, we were able to just tone it down and give it this very sort of, it feels almost like silk, And then it means that the focus is on the centre, which, because of the concentric guilloche, has a much more vibrant sunburst. But again, without it being too polished, too overdone.
Yeah, so this is using Bristol leather, so leather that is made in our home city of Bristol by Britain's oldest vegetable tanner. And what makes it particularly nice is Fears worked with that tannery back in the 1920s. Wow. And so it's our oldest supplier that we've rekindled a relationship with.
The other thing that I always think is separates the really very, very, very good from just average is the quality of finishing. And I think the quality of the finishing of both the dial and the case here is, well, it's a Fears trademark. Your finishing is of an exceptional standard, and this continues that sort of journey into the sort of finishing of your watches. But it absolutely stands out.
Well, you mentioned about the finishing, about it is something which and this is frustrating, especially when yourself and I are selling watches online. Photos can convey so much, but really it's when you hold it, when you feel it, when you look at the mirror polishing, how completely smooth it is. The brushing on the top sections of the cushion case.
Yeah, it's
The way that's done is it goes onto the lathe, it turns, and each case, then someone goes on there and puts the brushing on by hand.
Yeah, I must say I love the cushion case.
Yeah.
I think it's just it's got that sort of slightly retro feel to it that just is really appeals to me. It's so precise, it's so beautifully mirror polished where that's required. The execution, I think, is superb, and I think the case. Well, I know the case was from your manufacturer in Germany, I think.
Yes.
We helped with the dial and the hands, and I think they've come together in a beautifully cohesive way. But it's that level of finishing, and I think you were quite a little surprised, if I'm not.
Yes, I mean, I had high hopes because I knew the different, the case maker, dial maker. I knew we were working with, as we always do with the top people. This was going to be beautifully made. But I think even when you look at the renders, even if you look at the 3D models, until you hold it, until you feel the weight of it, until you see how the light catches the applied ring on the dial. I think, on photos, when you look straight on, you go, oh, it's got a silver ring. It could be printed.
Yeah.
But what you don't realise is this is a proper machined ring with different finishes, bevels, and the way it joins with the ring around the window.
It's beautiful, isn't it? And the transitions are
it's got a flow. But these weren't easy to do.
No.
I mean, this is the sort of thing, you go to a dial maker and say, hey, we'd like to do this. And you can see the look of fear in their eye, where they're just going, but we've never done anything like that before. To get that precise shape, machined, milled and finished. And, to actually get that beveling, it involves a lot of handwork to get it just right. And then the subtlety of the sunburst in the dead space, you could go for a very obvious sunburst, but actually it's going, well, no, let's tone it down and let's use a particular type of matte varnish that helps bring the colour and the vibrancy through without it looking flashy.
Yeah, I completely agree.
That would be too obvious.
The other thing about this is, and I don't wish to sound like a watch snob here, but the audience who are able to purchase this, it is an audience that will really appreciate the level of detail and expertise that's gone into this watch. They will see the execution here is of a very, very, very high standard. Not everybody understands that, but I think this audience definitely will.
Look at this. This is the inside of the case back. No one will ever see this other than the watchmaker. It's still finished. The rotor is still finished to the high crystal.
Well, it's one of my favourite stories of watchmaking that Patek, even to this day, polished the underside of their dials.
Yes.
And nobody's ever going to see the underside of their dial, but they insist on doing it. It's that sort of attention to detail that I think is always quite kind of awe-inspiring, at least to me anyway.
The other thing about this watch, of course, is at 40.5 millimetre diameter, it's incredibly wearable. So
very wearable.
Apart from anything else, it's very comfortable in wear, but it's also most wrists will find this beautifully accommodating. So it's almost the perfect size. I mean, around 40, 41 between the two. This is sort of the sweet spot these days for what we're finding anyway at CW.
I mean, one of my colleagues, when they first saw it, the team have slowly been shown it, because we tend to, with projects like this, we keep quite a lockdown, only a few people know. And, at Fears, we called it Project GB.
Yes, that's right. You gave the name to Project GB, quite right.
But when one of my colleagues saw it the other day for the first time, held the first watch, and they said, it's got this weird thing where it feels like I've seen something like this before. It's almost got a slightly sort of Edwardian, sort of decadent feel. But at the same time, it feels like something from the future.
Yeah.
It's got this very weird play between
What a metaphor for the Alliance.
Exactly.
It is a true metaphor for the Alliance. The other thing I like about it is and I wasn't sure until quite late in the process, the placement of your name.
Yes.
It's quite an interesting place for the name, but it really works.
Having the name up there and then England at 6, and because this is the thing, we're so used when we're designing watches or creating watches, they have 2, maybe more hands. 12 is at 12, 6 is at 6. But, just as with the bel canto, something like this, it suddenly changes the rules. And you're going, well, there isn't an obvious place to put the name. And I think that works. But I'm pleased with the fact that, when you're wearing it, yes, it is the collaboration. Yes, it is the Alliance watch. But actually, when you put it on the wrist, I think it's a watch you could wear it every day and just enjoy it, enjoy the feel of it. And I think that's why I'm so pleased.
So would you be proud to have that in the Fears collection?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even though we will,
our job here is
exactly. This is a watch. I'm very pleased that the pre-production sample will be going into the Fears archive.
Yeah.
So this will be sitting alongside watches dating back to 1846.
Wow.
And so I'm very pleased that this will actually be on display in the Bristol showroom in our archive display.
Oh gosh, that makes me feel very proud as well. Gosh.
This is very special.
To be part of the history of Fears is no small thing. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Does it look like Nicholas is in a therapy session to anyone else in those videos there with Mike taking him through his paces? Right, gents, first question then from the list we've got here. Mr. Bradley Holmes has asked, and this one's for you, Mike, is why don't we see the JJ01 or other jump hour modules on hand wound movements?
Oh, good question, Bradley. The JJ01 that we developed from the base of an SW200, as you might be aware, and that is the the same base and module that is in the Alliance 01. However, I can tell you that we've been working on the second generation of our own in-house movement, Caliber SH21, for some while now, and we hope to bring it to the market at the back end of this year, very latest early 24. And one of the things we've been doing in recreating SH21 in the second generation is we've been moving gear trains around, etc., to make space for the ability to have more complications. And one of those complications that I'm very keen for us to incorporate into Caliber SH21 is our own JJ01 jumping hour module, and I can say we've cracked it. And of course, Caliber SH21 with a 120-hour power reserve works incredibly well as a hand wound watch as well. So don't be at all surprised if at least one hand wound Caliber SH jumping hour movement hits the world within the next sort of 18 months to 24 months. That's the plan.
I was expecting you, Mike, to just whip something out from behind you there on one of those shelves, just as a little reveal, a little exclusive for tonight.
Something I prepared earlier. Not quite. Not quite. Although I will pull out bel canto.
Well, hold tight. We've got plenty of questions about bel canto in there for later. Just an interesting one actually, Mike. Just from a personal perspective, I really love the jump hour as a readout, as a dial layout. Was it always clear to you that this was something that this first Alliance collab watch was going to be?
We wanted something that was unique, but also made sense from a collaboration perspective. And I think both Nicholas, I think it was probably my suggestion that we used the jumping hour module. I mean, Nicholas was well aware of it, but it just seemed to fit the bill. It was something very much Christopher Ward's development. B, it's a fairly niche and unusual complication to see in watches. And I do think it fits perfectly with the brand that Nicholas has built in terms of the aesthetic and what you can do with it. It's very understated. I think, Nicholas, you have a line which is about being elegantly understated. And I do think that a jumping hour module really provides elegant understatement. The lack of a seconds hand, etc., all adds to that. And it's I just think a beautifully understated complication, and I think executed superbly well with the 01.
Nicholas, why is it, do you think, that we don't see many jump owls on the market? Because it really is, it's a rare bird to see in the wild, no?
Oh yeah, I mean it is a very unusual watch, but I was very aware of the Christopher Ward jump hour when the very first iteration launched. But for me, it's always been one of my absolute favorite. I mean, is it a complication? Because it is just time, but I would call it a complication for the extra engineering that goes into it. I think it's a very unusual watch to wear at first. Within a few hours, it suddenly becomes so obvious and so intuitive. You start going, why aren't all watches done like this? It's a bit like if you think of the date disc, before 1945, before Hans Willdorf, introduced it on the Rolex Datejust, you always had a pointer date. And so you'd always have to look and stop and figure. Whereas when he put it at 3 o'clock in a window, it meant that you always knew where to look. Your eye just went to one location on the dial. And that's the thing with this watch. It's really easy to tell the time. And someone actually jokingly said to me earlier this week, oh, wouldn't it be fun to see a jump hour dive watch? And I said, well, actually, wouldn't it make the perfect dive watch? Because really, when you're diving, the minutes are the only thing that needs a hand and are what matters. You want to remove all the clutter from the dial. So I don't think there's an easy answer to say why you don't see many of them, because I think if more people got the opportunity to try one on and wear it, I think very quickly you'd see it working its way into collections. I think it's just because it is unusual to begin with.
It's interesting actually, because you see them a lot in old pocket watches. You see them from some old manufacturers from the Holy Trinity that was a go-to. The jump hour was a real go-to. I personally absolutely love it. Now, we have not designed this evening for us to be at distance, because you gents have had a fallout during the process of making this watch. We have done it because you're still on speaking terms and you're friends. Nathan Davies here has asked, he hasn't asked specifically, did you have a fallout? But he's effectively saying, did you have a fallout? Yes or no? What went well in the collaboration, Nicholas? And what were the areas of challenge, difficulty, maybe technical or maybe personal?
It's a really good question. I have to say, I would say with your joking question, the opposite was true. I knew Mike, and I think we would have said we were friends at the start of this. I would say we're closer friends and we know each other a lot better as a result. I look at this watch and I now see, yes, I see a watch we've created for the Alliance, but I also see my friendship and how it's blossomed with Mike over the last 2 years. So I think that is a sign of how well things actually went. And I went into it thinking, the things that could go badly could be, a clash of cultures. Fears is a much smaller company than Christopher Ward. We have our team, we have our ways of working, and they have their team and their ways of working. But straight off, there wasn't that. There seemed to be a very good mutual respect. And actually, interestingly, I noticed very early on, and I don't know who from Christopher Ward and Fears is listening to this, but I got the impression that both teams were trying to make sure that to the other team, they saw everything was done as professionally and easy as possible with no mix-up. I was in awe of how kind of easy things went. Emails were being replied to within minutes of dropping in the inboxes. It was a real pleasure to see that. I mean, the challenges that I think we hadn't really anticipated hitting weren't to do with this project, actually. I think they were more, global challenges that a lot of people will recognize in the supply chain crisis. It's affected a lot of people last year, and it affected this project. I mean, we think back to when we were placing orders for cases and dials. Really, we should have had this watch out at the end of the summer, but things just got delayed and delayed and delayed. And there were moments of frustration where we're just going, we just need to get cases, or we just need the dials. And that wasn't any fault of either company. Without passing the buck, it was a fault of just our suppliers for all components being overwhelmed by the boom in watches in the last 2 years. But other than that, no, it has genuinely been a real pleasure to do this. And I think, and I hope you agree with me, Mike, if we sat our teams down and asked them, I don't think from our side there's anything we would have changed how we worked on this. I mean, I really am surprised at how smooth and well it's worked.
You were a nightmare, Nicholas. Can I just rescind everything he's just said? No, I can't think of any major hiccups. It's when you start from a position of shared values and a shared passion for doing things properly, and a shared passion for the alliance as well, and wanting to create something beautiful for the membership of the alliance. It's not a bad place to start. I think as soon as the critical moment was really when when our designers presented their first thoughts to Nicholas, and then believe me, we were all there was trepidation in the room on both sides, and I think you relaxed, Nicholas, when you saw the work they had done, because they had genuinely, I think, listened to, done their research on fears, understood the aesthetic, understood the values of the brand and the business. And, it was very straightforward once we saw the first designs, because you fell in love with them, I fell in love with them. And then, of course, there's iterations and discussions, but it was a genuine pleasure all the way through. And I can tell you that the team at Christopher Ward are incredibly proud that you, Nicholas, particularly, had that response. It was a big moment for them. It really was. So on their behalf, I thank you. Other than that, though, you were a complete nightmare.
I've got to say, gents, just as a sort of a slight outsider on the media side of things, I have to say and being English as well, British, what's lovely is that it really feels as though you're actually moving in the same, you're moving towards the same goal, which is to promote, pioneer, and ensure that watchmaking comes and stays at the forefront of British manufacturing. So that's the key, and it comes across. So, right. Final video of the night. Please enjoy.
Well, I know that when I first came and met with yourself and the designers about this project, it was fascinating because I arrived and suddenly you had previous jump hour watches that you had made, but you also had the movement, so I could see how the movement worked.
This is where it's so different from a date disc, because it's a whole disc then held in place by screws. I mean, the sort of detail of that, but then I guess there's quite a lot of torque driving it. And
there is, yeah.
That was the thing. It was when you explained to me about the fact that, it jumps absolutely on the hour.
Well, one of the I'm not sure we've ever done as good a job marketing this calibre as we should. Originally designed by our then master watchmaker Johannes Janker. We're going back now 11, 12 years. And Johannes was, a genius watchmaker. He's now the technical director of Solita. Worked with us for a number of years and developed the JJ calibers as well as caliber SH21. Not a man to have lack of ambition in terms of watchmaking. And when we determined that a jumping hour would be a really great movement for us to develop. And it's the module that sits above. The base movement is a Solita SW200, and what Johannes created was a module that sits atop that. And no, he just didn't want to create a jumping hour. He wanted to create the most accurate jumping hour that ever existed. Yeah. Now, it's probably quite difficult to prove or disprove that. However, when you realise I would describe it as genius, in that what he's done is, over the course of the hour, most jumping hours produce power in one spurt. Yeah? What this does is, during the course of the hour, it transfers power piece by piece by piece. So you then get this very accurate and smooth transition. So it turns exactly at the hour. And if you go and look at, and we did, if you go and look at jumping hours elsewhere, you'll find that they're always either just before, nearly always just before, or just after. Yeah. This strikes absolutely on the hour.
And it sounds a bit weird because it's literally just changed the hour as you've been holding it. But it makes a beautiful sound.
You assume it's with watch parts that you just put it all together and it all runs, but actually things have to be calibrated, they have to be adjusted. And I think this is, it's literally behind the dial. These are the things people don't see. But this is the skill of the watchmaker, making sure everything does line up and make sure it does go together. And especially when adjusting the hand and putting the hand on, you know, this isn't about two hands lining up with each other, which is visually very easily. With this, they've actually got to make sure that the hand is lining up on that exact spot where it turns.
Yeah, exactly right.
When I was here, I saw the movement and I had a play with the previous Christopher Ward models that had used it.
Yes.
But it was when it was holding it like this, and you see it in the Fears case and all this, and you turn it, and it's a feeling. It makes a noise. It makes a very kind of definite click.
Yes,
but
it
it's
does.
also the way that it does it bang on 12 or 60 minutes. And for me, that's something that, you know, I can sit here and talk about it, but until you actually hold it and experience it, it's one of those small things where people say, well, how when you pick up a watch, how do you know, how does it feel quality? This is often one of those sort of layman terms. Basically, like, how do you know it feels solid? It's a proper watch. And for me, that is exactly it. It's that way it moves. You know, as you're turning the crown, the smoothness of it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people assume a jump hour is like a date. It just moves. It's not at all. And of course, it's changing, you know, 24 times a day.
Yeah, and that's, you're right. It's one of the key aspects of how you can determine the quality of a watch. It's that level of engineering.
And I think when you look at this, there is that feeling that, you know, everything is just put together. But did you just see there? The way, as it changes, the way the mirrored, polished rim suddenly reflects the new number.
I hadn't, but now you pointed out, it's another little surprise, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when you in that final bit where it's then just turning.
I hadn't.
And actually, that was something that both the designers noticed, because as it changes the reflection.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, lovely.
And they're the only, you can't CAD model those. They're the only things you notice when you build the watch and see it.
Yeah, it's got to be a physical thing to see that.
I've been in the watch industry for over 12 years now. I was a watchmaker for 5 years at Rolex. I still, every time I see a balance going backwards and forwards, it just is...
It is mesmerising, isn't it?
It is.
It's one of the great things. I mean, what we're seeing here is really the SW200, because the module sits atop the 200, and it's a relatively small number of additional components, and isn't all great design. Back to the less is more philosophy. Isn't usually great design limited in terms of the execution. It's not about throwing lots of things, including the kitchen sink, at something. It's about how you can get to the end result using the least number of components. And that was, as I say, Johannes Janker, who originally designed the module. That was his philosophy, and that is his raison d'etre. That's how he does stuff. And so it plays perfectly into this jumping hour module.
I do love the way the rotor is done with that beautiful deep engraving and then the twin flag.
Yeah, no, yeah,
so
yeah,
good
yeah,
on there.
Yeah. It's nobody will ever see it.
No. 0-0 for the pre-production.
What? Honestly can't remember how we decided on using caliber JJ01, the jumping hour caliber, for the movement. What was the genesis of that?
Well, I think it came to when we were discussing, right, you know, we would do a collaboration, and it naturally seemed right that it would use a Christopher Ward movement or, you know, our module. But why this one? I think it's simply, I had years and years and years ago imagined that one day there could be a Brunswick watch that incorporated a jumping hour. It's not technically a complication, but it's one of those slightly more sort of, I'd say it's on the more romantic scale, a bit like a chiming watch. You know, it's something where it has a practical use, but it's not as sort of tool-like a chronograph or something.
Yeah.
And I thought that would suit not only Fears, but it would also suit the shape of the watch. But I think when we were first discussing this, you hadn't used the JJ01.
It's been rested for a little while.
Yeah.
And I think what will happen as a result of this collaboration is we'll probably bring it back out at some point, because it's reminded us of how accomplished a movement it really is.
we've kept it in a very sort of elegant way, a very sort of British way, very understated. You know, you flip the watch over, and on the back of the 4 lugs, you've got the logo for the Alliance, you've got the Fears Pipette logo, you've got the edition number, so 01 to 50, and then you've also got the Christopher Ward logo. And actually, this was quite a funny story. So the case was made by one of the Fears case makers in Germany, and when we sent them over the drawings, and then they said, oh, and what are you doing the engraving? So we sent them over the design file. And I then get a phone call from the owner of the business, a lovely chap, and he calls me up and goes, oh, I've got a slightly awkward thing to say. We may not be able to engrave all the images. And I said, oh, why not? Is there a problem? Is it the artwork? Assuming it's a technical problem. And he goes, no, one of the images, I don't know, it's actually the logo for Christopher Ward. And if we put it on there, we will, we'll get in trouble because it's their trademark, it's registered. And I started laughing, and he's going, oh, what's so funny? And I said, well, the watch is a collaboration between the 2 brands, so it's fine. I said, it's absolutely fine. Of course we're allowed to use the logo.
I'm going to sue you instead.
And then we sue. But then in the most wonderfully sort of correct German way, he said, oh, okay, that makes sense. Could you still send me a signed letter confirming this? And then you take me exactly. And so there I was, writing this letter and signing it and DHLing it out to Germany. But I think it was, for me, it's lovely because it's going, actually, our logos are recognisable. But also, what was interesting from him was...
Well, I was so pleased that he recognised that logo. I mean, that was great.
But then he's suddenly going, oh, this is wonderful. It's quite unusual to watch brands collaborating. And I think, when you're this way into a project like this, you kind of take it almost for granted, going, well, actually, this is 2 watch companies collaborating. And so often it'll be a watch brand and someone else. So I think that brings it nicely together.
Right, gents. Final push for the evening. We may finish just after 8 o'clock. We'll see how these questions go. But both of these gents off camera have agreed to take on a quick fire section where we're going to give them a maximum of 30 seconds to answer these questions. And we'll see how far we go. So first question is, do you know what you use the funds raised to advance the work of the Alliance? Who would like to take that?
So I take that, Nicholas. Yeah. And there are a number of things, but the next big initiative that we've got with the Alliance is to create a careers hub. Effectively, we're looking to put anybody who's interested in a career within watchmaking per se in touch with trade members. And so we feel that the creation of a hub that allows for that interaction will benefit hopefully both trade members, but particularly people who are interested in coming into this industry.
Would you collaborate the other way around from an anonymous contributor? So taking a Fears touch to a Christopher Ward watch.
A Fears touch.
That could certainly be an interesting thing. I think when we approached this, there was absolutely no. It wasn't defined. It was a blank sheet of paper as to which way round it might go. This was the way it between us, very naturally, it felt this was the way we wanted to go. But never say never. I mean, there's no reason why
I would love it. I would love it. I would love to see Nicholas and his team's interpretation of Christopher Ward. So I mean, if you're up for it, I'm up for it.
Yeah, exactly.
It might be worth clarity here. We've got a question from Christopher, which I believe has been covered, but let's just go over it again. So all members are able to purchase the Alliance 01 watch, and then only 50 people who are not members will be able to purchase on Friday. Nicholas, do you want to take that one?
No, so slightly different from that. Basically, the only people who are able to purchase have to be club members, and there are only 50 watches available. So those 50 watches are on a first come, first serve on Friday. But it's not open to the public at all. So it's only open to club members. So if you are a club member, then you will receive 9 a.m. GMT on Friday morning an email with the link to the Fears website and the password. And we ask that people don't share that password, because every sale will be checked against the club database to make sure it is official. But then at 3 p.m. Friday, so 6 hours later, make sure you can get on the website, make sure your password's working. 3 p.m. GMT on Friday, that's when the watches go live on that link. So if you are a club member, there are, it's limited to 50 pieces.
And let's not forget, it's for a great cause as well. Mike, this one's probably for you. So you're open to where each component from the watch comes from. Britain is poorly represented. Do you think the increase in component manufacturing is possible here?
Of course, it's possible. I think we're not naive enough to think that it's you can wave a magic wand. There are some small signs of British componentry beginning to happen. I'm aware of, and I'm working with one individual who hopes at some point to be able to create a commercially viable case manufacturer, and we're doing what we can to support them. But it will be a long haul, and because commerciality is what will ultimately drive the growth of watchmaking in Britain. Yeah, so, and it's an expensive business creating an infrastructure for watchmaking. But can it happen? Yes, I believe it can. Will it happen very quickly? No, it won't. Are there small steps being taken and being supported by people like the Alliance? Yes.
This is an anonymous contribution here. Will the Alliance 01 be as acclaimed as the Bel Canto? My Bel Canto is somewhere between London and Montreal. I think, Mike, what this anonymous contributor is saying is, if the house is on fire, are you taking the Bel Canto out, or are you taking the Alliance 01 out?
I've got two wrists.
There we go. Brilliant. We'll take that one. Right, Nicholas, this one's for you. Would you consider or explore other JJ variants, considering the massive success of the Bel Canto? Sorry, Mike, that's another one for you there.
So could you repeat that, please?
Would you consider or explore other JJ variants, considering the massive success of the Bel Canto?
Yes.
Were there any, sorry, Mike, sorry, Nicholas, this one is for you. Were there any designs that came out during this process, maybe when you gave feedback following the presentation, that we may see come to fruition in the future? From Phil Warnes.
Very, very good question. So there were 6 different designs presented. I went into that meeting, and it was very clear that Mike and his design team, they just said, we all agree there is one which is a clear favorite for us, but we'll be interested to see what you think. And I remember sitting down thinking, well, great, what if I clearly don't like that one and then like a different one? That's going to be, loggerheads. But I don't have a poker face, and everyone kind of sighed of relief when they saw, when we got to design number 4, which is this watch, they could just see my face light up. And it was interesting though, there was another design that I realized would not be right for this project, but it's something I've kind of kept at the back of my mind, thinking that would be a beautiful watch to create at some point. But there's no plans to do that. But it was wonderful to see 6 completely different designs and see different things that did work and other things that in my mind weren't quite there. But there was something else, but it wouldn't have been right for this project. So no.
Mike, what are the biggest costs associated with R&D, generally speaking?
Well,
in 30 seconds.
It depends on the project in hand, but if you're trying to create a movement or even a module of a movement, there are huge costs involved in that, including if you go all the way to CNC machines, etc. But it often depends on the project. But probably the most the ongoing cost is in people's brains and their imaginations, and that's just salaries.
Nicholas, Alan from Project Pursue, what are the biggest challenges facing micro brands in the next 5 years?
I think the next 5 years, it's not the previous 5 years. There's been the huge amount of competition, the huge number of new brands coming onto the scene. That has slowed down considerably. So I don't think that's it. I think it's how the existing brands mature, and then they're maturing in very different ways. You know, when you look at Fears, we are 6 years since the restart, actually, 6 years and a quarter now. And you're suddenly going, well, actually, with 7 people on our team, our head office, we're about to have our new workshop being completed. Suddenly it's seeing how we evolve beyond being a micro brand. How do we evolve beyond being a startup? And I think the challenges are what face a lot of other companies, small independents, even through to the big brands owned by groups. We increasingly find the challenges that they face are challenges that we face as we're very slowly kind of catching up in that direction.
Another one for you, Nicholas. Will there be any other collaborations from Alliance members in the future? We talked about dive watches earlier. Yeah. You touched on dive watches. Right. Kevin would love to see a Fears Vertex dive watch. So it feels a little bit wrong speaking about a potential Vertex collaboration with Mike on the line. It's almost like asking you on your date whether you preferred last night's date to this one. But what are your thoughts on a Fears Vertex dive watch?
Well, Mike, close your ears first. So, I mean, as people know, I'm very, very good friends with Don, the refounder of Vertex. And similar to the Fears story, he restarted his family's British watch company. So people often think we're huge rivals, and we're not. We have lunch every month together in person. We're very, very close friends. Hey, I'm due to speak to Don later this week. Why don't I throw the question to him? I mean, I think one thing though is very important to realize. The reason I'm very lucky to count myself friends with different brand owners is because of something Mike said. We have the same beliefs, the same ethos, the same idea of what we want to create. What we actually create is very different, and I'm in awe of what Vertex are doing, but it's so different to what Fears does. That's when things are ripe for a collaboration. But at the same time, I have so much respect for what he does. I don't look at it and think, oh, I could improve it in this way by sticking my oar in. So no, I don't think that's on the cards anytime soon.
Mike, are there any plans for in-person events?
Through the Alliance?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. I mean, we obviously we started in 2020, right in the teeth of the pandemic, when everything was, as this is, virtual in a sense, and online. We believe there is an appetite to have an Alliance live event, and that's something that we're working on at the moment and thinking about. But I think all of us involved with the Alliance think, in the next 12 months, a live event would be the right next step.
Brilliant. Final question, Nicholas. Is the watch water resistant?
It certainly is. And it's one of our most water resistant pieces, actually, to 100 meters. It's Mike referenced our tagline earlier, elegantly understated. Well, the elegant side, I hope people would agree when you look at the watch. The understated side, I always joke the way Fears builds their watches are like, it's like a 1980s Mercedes-Benz. When you slam the door, you can hear it, you can feel it. So, it's 100-meter water resistance, even though it's not designed to be a sort of dive watch. It just means you can wear it. You do not have to worry about it. And, we record it to 100 meters. We test it beyond that. This is a very solid watch, screw down bezel, screw down case back. So yeah, it may look very dressy, but don't worry, it can withstand a few martinis being splashed over it.
Very British in its multifunction. Gents, just a final comment from John Hoover, who says, so very well done for an excellent cause. And on that note, at 3 minutes past the hour, thank you both very much for joining me this evening and allowing us to indulge ourselves in this incredible watch and this wonderful alliance.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Real pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone attending.
Yeah, absolutely.